The cargo container made a metallic groan as it swung too far to the left, and Nyx Avalon swore under her breath. She'd been coordinating freight transfers at the Meridian Transit Hub for 3 years now, and the loading crews still managed to surprise her with their creative incompetence. Easy on the thrusters. She called into her headset, waving her arms at the pilot controlling the magnetic crane. That container holds Valorian crystal glass. You break it, you're paying for it out of your salary for the next decade. The container stabilized, and Nyx exhaled slowly, tucking a strand of dark auburn hair behind her ear. The transit hub hummed with constant activity around her ship's docking and departing. Cargo being shuffled from one bay to another, and thousands of beings from dozens of species moving through the enormous orbital station. It's like blood cells through veins. She loved it here. The chaos, the diversity, the way every day brought something unexpected. Earth had felt too small, too predictable. Out here, at the edge of human-colonized space, she felt alive. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message. Diplomatic vessel requesting priority docking. Bay 7. VIP passengers aboard. Handle personally? Nyx rolled her eyes. VIP passengers always meant extra paperwork and someone complaining about accommodations. Still, priority docking paid well. And she'd been saving for a better apartment in the residential sector. She made her way through the cargo bay, her worn boots clanging against metal grating. Bay 7 was typically used for smaller vessels, and as she approached, she could see a sleek ship settling onto the landing pad with barely a whisper of engine noise. The design was unfamiliar, all flowing curves and iridescent. Panels that seemed to shift colors in the station's artificial light, Celestrian, she realized. She'd never seen one of their ships up close before. The Celestrians were known for keeping to themselves, a graceful species that valued art, philosophy, and complex social rituals. Their technology was beautiful but enigmatic, and they rarely ventured into mixed-species stations like Meridian. The ship's boarding ramp extended with a soft hiss, and Nyx straightened her posture, trying to look more professional despite the grease stain on her work jacket. She might coordinate cargo transfers, but she knew how to handle diplomatic niceties when required. 3 figures descended the ramp. The first 2 were clearly guard stall beings in ceremonial armor that seemed to be made of interlocking scales of some lightweight metal. But it was the third figure that made Nyx's breath catch. He was slender and elegant, with skin that held a subtle lavender-blue luminescence, as if moonlight lived just beneath the surface. His hair, if it could be called, that was more like strands of fine silver that floated gently around his face, moving with a life of their own. High cheekbones, large eyes, the color of deep amethyst, and features so refined they seemed almost sculpted. He wore robes of deep indigo with intricate embroidery that caught the light, and at his wrist was a bracelet unlike anything Nyx had seen, a band of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with a faint inner light. "Welcome to Meridian Transit Hub," Nyx said, proud that her voice came out steady. "I'm Nyx Avalon, freight coordinator. I'll be handling your docking procedures and cargo transfer." The Celestrian's eyes met hers, and she saw surprise flicker across his features. "You are the coordinator?" "I expected." He paused, and Nyx could see him choosing his words carefully. "Someone more senior." "I am senior staff," Nyx replied, allowing a hint of amusement into her voice. "Best in the bay, actually." "You're in good hands." One of the guards stepped forward. "We require discreet handling of our cargo. It contains cultural artifacts of significant value." "Understood," Nyx said, making notes on her tablet. "I'll personally supervise the transfer. Bay 7 is climate-controlled and has enhanced security. Your items will be safe." The elegant Celestrian moved closer, and Nyx caught a scent like night-blooming flowers and something else. Something cool and ethereal. "I am Tevan Shore, assistant to Ambassador Quillen. I will need to inspect your security measures before we proceed." "Of course," Nyx said. "Follow me." She led them into the bay's control room, very aware of Tevan walking beside her. He moved with an otherworldly grace, each step seeming almost choreographed. The guards remained outside, stationed at the door. "Here's the security grid," Nyx said, pulling up the holographic display. "Biometric locks, constant surveillance, and the bay is isolated from the main station network. Nothing gets in or out without authorization. Tavin leaned in to examine the display, and his sleeve brushed against Nix's arm. It was the briefest contact, barely noticeable, except for the bracelet on his wrist. It erupted with light, not the faint pulse she'd noticed before, but a brilliant cascade of colors that filled the small room. Tavin jerked back as if electrocuted, his amethyst eyes going wide with shock. He stared at the bracelet, then at Nix, then back at the bracelet. "That's," he whispered, his composed demeanor cracking. "That's impossible." "What is that thing?" Nix asked, concerned by his reaction. "Are you okay?" Tevin seemed incapable of speech. He held up his wrist, where the bracelet continued its luminous display, cycling through colors: deep blues, vibrant purples, soft roses, and finally settling into a steady, warm amber glow. He started, then stopped. He looked at her with an expression of complete bewilderment. "I need to sit down." Nix quickly pulled over a chair, and Tavin sank into it, still staring at his wrist. The light from the bracelet cast dancing shadows across his face. "Seriously, are you all right?" Nix asked, kneeling beside the chair. "Should I call a medical team?" "Do Celestrians have allergic reactions to something in our atmosphere?" "No," Tavin said faintly. "It's not that. This bracelet, it's called a resonance band. My people wear them from adolescence onward. They're attuned to our bioelectric fields." "Okay," Nix said slowly. "And why is it doing the light show?" Tevin's eyes met hers, and she saw wonder and fear warring in their depths. "Because it's found a resonance match. The bands are designed to identify ideal compatibility, mental, emotional, physical. When two people with complementary energies touch, the bands respond." Understanding began to dawn. "Like a soulmate indicator?" "That's an oversimplification, but yes," Tavin said. "The bands measure thousands of factors: neural patterns, pheromone responses, energy signatures. They've guided Celestrian bonding for generations." "And yours just lit up for a human," Nix said, a strange flutter starting in her chest. "It's never done this before," Tavin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've worn this band for 15 cycles. I've met hundreds of people, attended countless social functions. It's never even flickered." He looked up at her, vulnerable in a way that made her heart ache. "Until you—" Nix sat back on her heels, trying to process this. Does this happen with other species? Cross-species matches?" "Rarely," Tavin admitted. "Very rarely, and never with humans. Your species is too new to the galactic community. The resonance patterns are completely different." "What?" "But it happened anyway," Nix said softly. "But it happened anyway," he echoed. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the hum of the station and the soft pulse of the resonance band. Nix found herself studying Tevin's face, the elegant lines, the way his silver hair caught the light. The uncertainty in his eyes that made him seem less like an untouchable alien diplomat and more like someone very real and very frightened. "So what happens now?" she asked. Tavin took a shaky breath. "Traditionally, when bands resonate, the individuals enter a courtship period. They spend time together, learn about each other, determine if the connection is genuine." "Sounds reasonable," Nix said, trying to keep her voice light despite the way her pulse had quickened. "Though I'm guessing your people didn't have coffee with the human freight coordinator." "In mind is a traditional courtship activity." Small smile tugged at Tevin's lips, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, more approachable. "No, our courtship rituals typically involve poetry recitals and synchronized meditation." "Well, I can't promise poetry," Nix said, rising to her feet and offering him her hand. "But I do know where to find the best synthetic coffee on this station, and we can figure out the rest as we go." Tevin looked at her extended hand, then slowly reached out and took it. The resonance band flared bright again. This time Nix felt it, a warmth that spread from their joined hands up her arm, settling somewhere near her heart. "I would like that," Tavin said quietly. "Very much." The observation deck on level 12 had become their sanctuary over the past 3 days. Nix had discovered it years ago, a small, overlooked space with a panoramic view of the stars and passing ships, rarely visited by station personnel. As she waited for Tyven to arrive, she found herself checking her reflection in the transparent aluminum window more often than necessary. She'd traded her usual grease-stained work jacket for something cleaner, though she'd drawn the line at the formal attire some of her coworkers had suggested. This was still her, just a slightly more polished version. The door whispered open, and Tyven stepped through. He'd abandoned his formal robes for something simpler, a tunic of deep violet that made his luminescent skin seem to glow even brighter. His silver hair floated in its characteristic way, and the resonance band on his wrist pulsed softly with warm amber light. "You found it," Nick said, smiling as he approached. "Your directions were quite precise," Tyven replied, moving to stand beside her at the window. "Though I confess, I got lost twice." "This station is remarkably complex. It's a beautiful chaos," Nix agreed. "Like everything humanity builds, we're not great at planning, but we're excellent at adapting." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a massive cargo hauler drift past. The resonance band continued its gentle pulse, and Nix noticed Tyven, glancing at it periodically, as if still unable to believe what it was telling him. "You keep looking at it," she observed gently. Tyven's lips curved in a self-deprecating smile. "Forgive me. In Celestrian society, the resonance bands are everything. They guide our most important decisions, our social structures, our entire approach to relationships." To have mine activate for someone so unexpected, he paused. "I'm still adjusting." "Unexpected?" Nix repeated, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Is that diplomatic speak for wrong species?" "No," Tyven said quickly, turning to face her fully. "Not wrong. Just uncharted. My people value predictability. Nix, we've spent millennia perfecting our social systems, our bonding rituals. Everything follows established patterns." He gestured helplessly at the band. "This doesn't fit any pattern." Nix reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and gently touched the resonance band. It flared brighter at her touch, and she felt that strange warmth again like sunlight on her skin. But deeper, reaching somewhere inside her chest. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," she said softly. "Patterns are safe, but they can also be limiting. Sometimes the best things happen when you step outside the expected path." "Is that a human philosophy?" Tyven asked, his amethyst eyes searching her face. "It's a Nix philosophy," she replied with a grin. "I didn't come all the way out to a frontier station by following the expected path. My family wanted me to stay on Earth, get a nice corporate job, settle down in a nice suburban dome. I wanted stars and adventure," and she gestured at the window. "All of this your family disapproved? At first? But they came around when they realized I was happy." Nix tilted her head. "What about yours? What would they think about this?" She indicated the space between them, the glowing band, the impossible connection. Tyven's expression grew complicated. "My family is traditional. My sister Morel is already bonded through proper resonance matching. She married someone from an appropriate lineage, someone whose band harmonized with hers at a sanctioned gathering. It was elegant, predictable, perfect. And you," Nix prompted. "I've attended countless gatherings," Tyven admitted, "met hundreds of potential matches. The band never even flickered. My family grew concerned. They began to suggest that perhaps my band was defective, that I should undergo recalibration." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And then I touch a human freight coordinator in a cargo bay, and suddenly it's like a supernova." "Inconvenient timing," Nix said sympathetically. "Inconvenient everything," Tyven agreed. But he was smiling now, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Though I find myself increasingly grateful for the inconvenience." Nix felt warmth bloom in her chest. "Yeah, and why's that?" Tyven stepped closer, close enough that she could see the subtle patterns in his luminescent skin-like constellations beneath the surface. "Because in 3 days, you've shown me more genuine emotion, more unfiltered life than I've experienced in years of diplomatic functions and formal courtship rituals." refreshing. I'm also stubborn, occasionally reckless, and I have a terrible habit of making jokes at inappropriate times, Nix warned. I know, Tevin said, his voice soft. You made a joke about Ambassador Quillen's hat yesterday, while he was wearing it. Not in my defense, it did look like a disgruntled bird, Nix protested, then winced. He didn't hear me, did he? Tevin said, and for a moment Nix's heart stopped. Then Tevin's face broke into a genuine laugh, the first she'd heard from him. He found it hilarious. He's been calling it his disgruntled bird hat ever since. You may have accidentally endeared yourself to one of the most influential diplomats in the sector. Nix laughed with him, the sound echoing in the small observation deck. When their laughter faded, they found themselves standing closer than before, the resonance band casting amber light across both their faces. Teach me something, Tevin said suddenly. Something human, something that doesn't involve cargo manifests or station regulations. Nix considered for a moment, then pulled out her personal tablet. Okay, but you have to promise not to judge. I promise nothing, Tevin said with mock solemnity, but his eyes were dancing with curiosity. She pulled up her music library and selected a song, something with a strong beat and soaring vocals. One of her favorites from Earth. This is called dancing. Well, this particular style is called club dancing, but there are hundreds of variations. The point is to move to the music, to feel it in your body, and just let go. The music filled the observation deck, and Nix began to move. It wasn't formal or practiced, just honest movement, her body responding to the rhythm. She closed her eyes, losing herself in the music for a moment. When she opened them, Tevin was watching her with an expression of wonder. Your turn, she said, extending her hand. I don't know how, Tevin protested, but he took her hand anyway. The band flared bright. There's no wrong way, Nix said, placing his other hand on her waist and keeping his hand in hers. Just follow the rhythm, and follow me. She began to move, guiding him through simple steps. Tevin was stiff at first, clearly uncomfortable with the lack of structure. But gradually, as the music continued, she felt him relax. His natural grace began to show through, and soon they were moving together with surprising synchronicity. This is very different from Celestian dancing, Tevin said, his voice slightly breathless. Our dances are highly choreographed, every movement predetermined. In this, Akos asked, spinning under his arm and coming back to face him. This is chaos, Tevin said, but he was smiling. Beautiful chaos. The song shifted to something slower, more intimate. Without discussing it, they adjusted their movement, swaying gently. Tevin's hand on her waist pulled her slightly closer, and Nix rested her free hand on his shoulder. Can I ask you something personal? Nix said quietly. Of course, what does the resonance actually feel like? For you, I mean. When we touched, Tevin was quiet for a moment, considering. It's like, have you ever heard a piece of music that seemed written specifically for you? That reached inside and touched something you didn't know was there? Yes, Nix said, thinking of certain songs that had moved her to tears. It's like that, but instead of music, it's another person's existence harmonizing with yours. I can feel your energy, not literally, but I'm aware of it in a way I've never experienced with anyone else. It's like my thoughts move more clearly. When you're near, like colors are more vivid, like I'm more myself somehow. Nix swallowed hard. That's beautiful. What does it feel like for you? Tevin asked. You don't have a resonance band, so I've wondered. I feel warmth, Nix said honestly. Like sunlight, but internal. And when we're together, I feel this sense of rightness, like pieces clicking into place. I don't know if it's the same as what you experience, but it's real. It's real, Tevin echoed, his amethyst eyes locked on hers. They'd stopped swaying. Standing perfectly still in the middle of the observation deck. The music continued, but neither of them noticed. Tevin's hand came up slowly, hesitantly, and cupped her cheek. His skin was cool against hers, and she leaned into the touch. Started, but Nix was already rising on her toes. Closing the distance between them, their lips met softly, tentatively. Tevin's lips were cooler than a human's, with a texture like silk. The resonance band erupted into brilliant light, cycling through every color imaginable. Nyx felt the warmth spread through her entire body, and for a moment, she could have sworn she felt what Tyven described, that sense of harmonizing of two separate melodies becoming one song. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Tyven's silver hair was floating wildly around his face, responding to some internal energy. His eyes were wide with wonder and something that might have been joy. That was, he began. Yeah, Nyx agreed, unable to stop smiling. The resonance bands have detailed protocols for courtship, Tevin said, still holding her close. Specific stages, proper timelines. We're supposed to spend months in chaperoned meetings before any physical contact beyond hand-holding. Are we breaking Celestrian law? Nyx asked, only half joking. Probably, Tevin said, but he was grinning now. Though technically, since you're human, the protocols don't explicitly apply. Convenient loophole, isn't it? Tevin's expression grew more serious. But Nyx, you should know this won't be simple. My family, my responsibilities, the cultural differences between our people, there will be challenges. I know, Nyx said, reaching up to touch his face, marveling at the feel of his luminescent skin. But I think you're worth it. We're worth it. I think so too, Tevin said softly. Then more firmly, I know so. The band doesn't lie, and neither does this. He placed his hand over his heart ore where Nyx assumed a Celestrian heart would be. They stayed in the observation deck for hours, talking and laughing and learning each other. Tyven told her about his homeworld, Celestria Prime, with its crystal spires and singing gardens. Nyx told him about Earth, about growing up in a world recovering from climate disasters, about humanity's desperate reach toward the stars. We're so different, Tevin mused at one point. His fingers intertwined with hers as they sat on the deck floor, backs against the window. We are, Nyx agreed, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the best connections aren't the predictable ones. Maybe we're supposed to find someone who shows us a completely different way of seeing the universe. A very human perspective, Tevin said, but there was affection in his voice. My people would say that compatibility requires similarity, and yet your resonance band disagrees. And yet my resonance band disagrees, Tevin repeated, looking at the steady amber glow. Perhaps our technology is wiser than our traditions. As the station's artificial night cycle began, casting the observation deck in deeper shadows, neither of them moved to leave. They sat together in the darkness, watching ships pass in the infinite black, their hands joined in the resonance. Band glowing softly between them, a small light in the vastness, marking something new and unexpected and entirely their own.